Good evening, everybody. My name is Tinku Ruff, and I'm in Beacon, New York. And thank you so much for having me tonight to talk about one of my favorite fascicles by Dogen Zenji, which is continuous practice. Continuous practice is really more of a collection of stories of the masters and the famous and the non-famous, the old and the not so old teachers of Buddhism in the past. So it's kind of like a big family reunion. And so when I was asked to speak on this fascicle, I got really excited because I was like, oh, all my friends, I get to see them again. So thank you so much for inviting me to come. So I'd like to start off by reading the passage that I was assigned to teach on as a review. And it has to do with Rujing, who's Dogen Zenji's teacher. So this is Dogen's words. My late teacher Rujing was from Yue. At age 19, he abandoned scriptural studies, engaged in practice, and did not turn around even at the age of 70. When offered a purple robe with the title of master from the emperor, he sent a letter politely declining it. Monks in the 10 directions respected him for his actions, and those both near and far who were knowledgeable rejoiced over it. The emperor was extremely impressed and sent him an offering of tea. Those who've heard of this admired it as something rare at the time. Rujing's action is indeed a genuine, continuous practice. I say this because loving fame is worse than breaking a precept. Breaking a precept is a transgression at a particular time. Loving fame is an ailment of a lifetime. Do not foolishly hold on to fame, and do not ignorantly accept it. Not to accept fame is continuous practice. To abandon it is continuous practice. The titles of master for the first 6 ancestors were all given posthumously by emperors. These ancestors did not receive their titles due to love of fame. Likewise, you should give up love of fame within birth and death and simply wish for the continuous practice of the Buddhas and ancestors. Do not be like devouring creatures. To greedily love the self, which is of slight significance, doesn't take you above the level of creatures and beasts. To abandon fame and gain is rare for humans and devas, but all Buddha ancestors have done so. Some say, I seek fame and gain for the benefit of sentient beings. And this is where Dogen, I'm from the South, so this is the voice of Dogen that I hear in my head based on my upbringing. This is a greatly mistaken view held by heretics within the Buddha Dharma, as well as by a troop of demons who slander the true Dharma. Does this view mean that the Buddha ancestors who do not seek fame and gain are unable to benefit sentient beings? What a laugh. What a laugh. Not seeking can benefit sentient beings. How is it so? Those who, without understanding this, promote what is not beneficial as beneficial are a troop of demons. Sentient beings helped by such demons are bound for hell. Such demons should deplore that their lives are in darkness. Do not regard such ignorant ones as beneficent beings. So thus, declining the offer of a title of master has been an excellent custom since olden times. This is something that those of us in later generations should study. To see Rujing in person was to meet that person. Sometimes Dogen gets a little bit fiery, which is kind of fun, you know. He has very strong views on the Dharma. And I think it comes out of his passion for what he's saying. But yes, it does sound a little bit like a Southern Baptist preacher, at least in my own head. So when I think of continuous practice myself, I think of my own teacher. My teacher ordained as a monk in his 20s, and he's now in his 70s. And he just goes. He just does his thing every single day of his life. Sometimes I think of him like, like a machine, or like the Energizer Bunny, just going. He usually wakes up early. It's his habit to take a bath before zazen and to shave his head. So he wakes up around 3. He takes a bath. He shaves his head. He goes around the temple. He makes the water offerings, and we start zazen at 4:20. He's usually in his place by 4. And so this is how it starts. We do zazen. We do service. Lay people come in for zazen after that, and sometimes nobody comes. And whether or not people show up, my teacher is in his place in the zendo. This is his continuous practice. And it continues like this throughout the day. We have service. We have service at 5 in the morning. We have service just before lunch. And we have service at 4:30 in the afternoon. And sometimes, these days, they're the same, can seem a little bit tedious. And nevertheless, when it's time to ring the bell, he's always right there ringing the bell, every time. When I was in training, sometimes we would be, like outside where he lives, there's a lot of snow. So we'd be really working or something out on the temple grounds, shoveling the snow. And I'd be all completely geared up in my snowsuit and sweating. And it would be like, oh no, it's time for service. And part of me would want to be like, oh man, I don't want to go in there and do service. I just want to keep shoveling the snow. And he never gave me a pass. And he never gave himself a pass either. And this is something that I really admired. So when I think of this fascicle, he's who comes to mind. Whether or not people are there, he's doing the same thing every day, every single day. One time I was riding in the back of a car in the United States, and there was a woman driving. This was just after a silent retreat. She was driving, and the Zen teacher, Shohaku Okamura, was in the front seat next to her, and I was in the back seat. And the woman was chatting to me a lot from her driver's seat. And she said, Tenku, who's your teacher? And the whole time that she'd been chatting, Okamura Roshi was silent, just kind of sitting there, post sesshin. So when she said that, I said, oh, my teacher is not famous. And Okamura Roshi perked up and he went, that is a good thing. And this made a strong impression on me as well. Loving fame is worse than breaking a precept. This is what Dogen teaches us. What is this all about? At Beacon Zen Temple, my temple, we've been talking for the past few weeks about humility and wisdom and how they're related. And the unifying factor is letting go of our ego, really dropping the ego. Loving fame is worse than breaking a precept. We can only be present in this way if we really let go of our ideas of who we think we are. If we let go of the I, if we let go of comparing ourselves to others. Fame is one of the 8 worldly winds in Buddhism. And they're called the worldly winds because, they can pull us back and forth off of the path. So we're taught to walk straight through the middle, upright and secure, and not to let these winds buffet us back and forth. So what are the 8 worldly winds? There's praise and blame, success and failure, pleasure and pain, and fame and disrepute. So if we get stuck wanting one or the other, then we get off the path. So it's not just okay to not like disrepute. We also shouldn't get caught up in fame. And this is a lot easier said than done, as I'm sure you all know. So how do we do this? We need our practice. We really need our practice. We need our community. We need the sangha to hold us accountable. We need the practice of zazen. We need to sit, let go of our ego. When thoughts arise, we notice them, let them go, and return. When likes and dislikes arise, we notice them, let them go, return to the breath. Over and over and over. This is continuous practice. We do this in zazen. We do this throughout the day. We do this when we're happy, when we're not happy, when we're in community. And we use the support of all of those around us to hold us through this continuous practice every moment of our lives. Teachings on humility come up in the Tibetan, the 8 verses on training the mind. And in the Tibetan tradition, when you receive an oral teaching, then you always acknowledge who it came from. So it's a practice that I really admire. So I received the 8 verses on training the mind from Venerable Tenzin Palmo in October of 2008, from Yangtze Rinpoche in November of 2011, and from His Holiness the Dalai Lama in 2012, in June. And the 2 verses that most come up in relation to humility are, with the determination to accomplish the highest welfare for all sentient beings who surpass even a wish-granting jewel, I will learn to hold them supremely dear. Whenever I associate with others, I will learn to think of myself as the lowest amongst all, and respectfully hold others to be supreme from the very depths of my heart. How do we do this? How do we respectfully hold others to be supreme from the very depths of my heart? I say this verse every day. I offer this verse. And in offering this verse every day, I join in those who gave me this verse. I join in with His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, who offers this verse every day, these 8 verses on training the mind. I join in with all of the Buddhas and ancestors before me. And when I first received this teaching, I found it hard to say, even out of my mouth. So I would mouth the words. Some of the later verses are more challenging. So after I made the vow to do this, then I would continue to do it every day, even if it took mouthing the words. And in doing this, I joined with others to support me in this practice. How do I hold others to be supreme from the very depths of my heart? We have to shift our orientation from me and what's going to help me, what will benefit me, to how can I be present in the world? How can I help others? It's not okay to be better than someone else. It's not okay to be just as good as someone else. And it's not okay to be worse than someone else. Pride is about being better than someone else, being just as good as someone else, or being not as good as someone else. Because why? All of these are rooted in me. The focus is on me. The focus is on our ego. So we must learn to let that go and shift our orientation. Loving fame is creates a craving for power. And the thing about power, as we crave it, it's never enough. If we have a little bit, then we need more. And then we need more. And then we need more. So we have to figure out how to shift our focus. And we do this through our practice, through our continuous practice. Practice on the days where we feel like it, on the days where we don't feel like it. Because once we've set out on this path, then we just keep going. And something that particularly inspires me in this way is just a really deep gratitude for all of those who came before us. All of the Buddhas and ancestors, known and unknown throughout space and time, have also done this. And because of this, I can do this too. All that we have, even our own life, comes due to all the people who have helped us over time. And this is how we shift our focus from me to one with the entire universe. When we meet someone, we stop worrying so much about what they think of me and shift towards giving them what they most want. What do they most want? The Dalai Lama is constantly saying, all beings want to be happy and don't want to suffer. This is what we can offer. Love and compassion from our hearts. This is how we shift our focus. We drop the me, we drop our ego, and let it get out of the way and shift towards compassion for all beings. The Buddhist teacher Shantideva taught that there's a really huge difference between arrogance and pride and self-confidence. So what is that about? It's not a lack of confidence. That's one clue. In fact, Shantideva says that the belief that we can't do this practice is actually a form of laziness. The belief that we can't do it is a form of laziness. When we feel I just can't, we're still focused on me. So this is the time that we have to make more efforts. And on the times where we make more efforts, we also have to look around us and join into the community of practitioners. We don't do this on our own. And we don't do this for ourselves. We don't do this for our health. We do this continuous practice every day for the benefit of all sentient beings. We have to remember this. We sit in zazen, letting go of thoughts, returning to the breath and the present moment. We go about our day in the world, letting go of me and shifting towards being present. This is continuous practice, continuous practice. Pride and confidence. Pride is when we really focus on our own positive qualities and accomplishments. So again, focus on me, right? Me. Pride has a quality of superiority or of putting ourselves up and putting others down. And you might remember this Zen precept if you have studied the precepts. I vow not to put myself up and put others down. The thing about putting ourselves up and putting others down is if we put ourselves up, we inevitably put others down, whether intentionally or not. If we intentionally put ourselves up by thinking only about our own positive qualities, then we've already put someone else under us. Or maybe if we've stepped on somebody to get to where we are, then we've put somebody else down. So we cannot keep this precept of I vow not to put myself up and put others down if we have ego, if we're invested in ourselves, if we look down on others. We have to learn to have confidence that there is something to learn from every single being in the universe. And this is a continuous source of learning because sentient beings are numberless. We will never run out of teachers if we have this orientation. I remember when I was new, I went to the San Francisco Zen Center many years ago, and I was going downstairs on the back stairs, and I met a monk. And at the time, I was a lay person, but I had been practicing in Japan, and I knew what to do, right? It's like, all right, here's a monk, and I know what you do in the temple. You put your hands in gasho, and you bow. So I did it, right? And to my utter surprise, the monk, who was clearly, very senior to me, exactly matched me. This made a very deep impression on me. I had been living in Japan, and for those of you who have lived in Japan, you know that the way that people bow has kind of a hierarchy to it. So, if you're equals, then you kind of bow and you match. And if you're like a little bit junior to somebody, then you kind of bow, and then this is the senior person, and you're kind of like that. And if you're really junior to somebody and they're super high, then it's kind of more like this. So in this case, my status, I was a lay person, and this was a monk, and clearly a senior monk. So it was, should have been like this. And usually when you do this as a lower status person, the higher status person will, kind of go like this. Just a little bitty nod. And this one didn't. He met me and he bowed. His Buddha nature bowed to my Buddha nature, and this is how we met. And this made such a deep impression on me, and I asked him about it later. This was Shohaku Okamura. And I said, why did you bow to me like that in the hallway? I don't understand. You're so much more senior than I am. And he said, my teacher, Uchiyama Roshi, taught me that everyone that I meet is my teacher, and I must treat them in that way. So he taught us to bow and say, I do not disparage you. When we have confidence in our understanding, then the I falls away. We don't need to build ourselves up artificially. We don't need to have fame. We don't need to care if people like us or don't like us. And as we let go of the I, our self-criticism also starts to dissipate, and the comparison with others starts to dissipate. And we can admit our faults. We can see the things that aren't so great about ourselves and work on them. And when we get to this place of really confidence in our understanding and confidence in the practice to carry us, which comes through the continuous practice, then we can't help but to help others. At the hospital where I work as a chaplain, there's a Catholic priest. His name is Father Ron, and he showed up every day during the surge of COVID. Was he scared? Yes, I'm sure he was scared. Was he, he's older. Was he at risk? Yes, he was at risk. And yet there he was every single day. Scared or not, he was there. He was present. And I said, Father, why did you do that? You could have, he's a volunteer, you know, he does this out of his own goodness of his heart. He's a volunteer. I said, why did you come? And he said, well, I couldn't not come. This is continuous practice. He showed up and he offered so much. He offered so much to so many people who so desperately needed it. And when I heard his story, I was so inspired. Wow, what a beautiful story. Just like in Continuous Practice Fascicle by Dogen, we hear these beautiful stories. Some of them are weird. Some of them are violent. Some of them are just, simple. And they inspire us in our practice because we're not doing this alone. We're doing this in the community of practitioners. How do we let go of the need to be special? Loving fame is worse than breaking a precept. How do we let it go? We come back to our practice over and over. We drop our ego. We admit our faults, or when we mess up, make repair. We genuinely rejoice in the positive qualities of others. And in doing so, we let go of the pain and the judgment of our own minds. Because our judgments really hurt us. So we let go. We use our natural talents and abilities for the benefit of others. And as we practice, we both understand more clearly our natural talents and abilities at the same time that our capacity grows. This is continuous practice. And this is what I wanted to share with you today. My teacher often teaches that there are 3 things that are most important in Buddhist practice. Number 1, continue. Number 2, continue. And number 3, continue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we'll open it up to questions. Everybody just remember to send it over to me in the chat and I will ask Tenku the questions. We actually already have a few. Okay. So Vic Kennick asks, do you see any distinctions between sitting Zazen and the Theravada mindfulness Vipassana practice? How do you integrate the traditions and teachings from Tibetan Buddhism into Soto Zen Buddhism, Soto Zen practice?
All right, I'm going to let Poshin pick that one up after I leave. And I'll just say that at the core of everything, no matter what practice we're doing, is the mindfulness of body as body. This is our the core of our Zazen. And what is at the core of body is breath. So the core of it all is breath. And there's a lot of overlap between those 3. But I think it would take me a few months to unpack all of that. But I'll say start with breath.
Itir Yakar asks, what can predominantly white sanghas do to include and do no harm to people of color? Thank you very much. Warm bow, Itir from Oakland, California.
Yeah, we have to start with ourselves. I feel very firm on this. So if we're predominantly white sangha, we're predominantly white sangha for a reason. And we need to examine that. And as we start really examining our whiteness and how that relates with the teachings of the Buddha, then we can start to, I would say, naturally become more open and welcoming. If we think that it's something we have to go out there to get, then that takes us outside of our practice. So we really have to start by understanding privilege and how that works. And we have to be active about it. So it doesn't mean that we only sit in Zazen. As we sit in Zazen, we also, we use that, and we also have to do stuff. We have to show up. You know, we have to work on listening more. We have to teach ourselves more. But we can't see that as something outside of ourselves or outside of our Buddhist practice. We have to really integrate them and really start by understanding who we are, as if we are white, predominantly white sanghas, and then growing and learning. And just like I said, with everything else, mess up, apologize, and keep going. Try. Make a mistake, learn from your mistake, and keep going. So this is, I think we all have to actively engage in this in a way that feels alive and real, and it must be grounded in Buddhist practice.
Thank you. Steph Napolitano asks, deep gratitude to you for this talk. During this time of the rise of female voice, how do we allow ourselves to feel selfless without continuing to be disparaged in society?
This one came up a lot in our group as we talked about it. You know, last week, I asked the group to give an example of humility. Who do you see as somebody who's humble? And we, everybody told a little story about the person they saw as humble. And I said, you know, I want to, at the end of it all, I said, I want to point something out to y'all, which is every one of you have named a white man. So why is it that we see humility? It seems like, you know, we're still unpacking this. So I don't really have something profound to say except that observation. Maybe we see humility as having power and then giving it up. So then what do people who have less power do? And in particular for women, I think often of the times that I have wanted to advocate for other women. And that happened recently as I was very strongly trying to advocate that men and women be equal in a Japanese ceremony. So traditionally, the monks would go in the room first, and then the laymen, and the ordained women after that, and then the lay women in that order. And I was like, you know, that's not going to fly in America. And so I strongly tried to advocate that we have to figure out a way to do the ceremony where we can have more equality. And I got so much resistance. And you know, I was called loud and hysterical, and I kept going because in this case I was clear, I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing this for future generations. You know, I'm not a novice anymore, so it's not really affecting me as strongly as it did at one time. But how do we find our voice, you know, without becoming arrogant? And I think really understanding clearly our practice and finding that self-confidence, you know, where it's not about me, but about the benefit of all beings, and orienting that way can be a guide. And then, you know, fame and disrepute. Sometimes everybody loves you and you can blink, and 2 weeks later, those same people all hate you. And we have to find our way straight through in the 8 worldly winds, not being pulled back and forth. So for women, we have to practice. We have to find that strength and that voice through our practice and just keep going. And if that voice needs to be loud sometimes, then make sure it's not all about you.
Gil asks, thank you for your teaching. Given our contentious times, where does forgiveness for self and others fit into continuous practice while dropping the ego?
as we drop the ego, we naturally understand that I'm not separate from you. And this is the place we can find space for forgiveness. And, forgiveness is, I don't know, sometimes forgiveness feels like a little extra. I mean, certainly apology is necessary, repair is necessary, and forgiveness, I don't know, like if I'm accepting you for who you are, really, and you're trying your best, as Brene Brown says, they're doing the best that they can. So if I truly believe that you are doing the best that you can, and you show up, which means that if you mess up, then you make repair and apologize, then forgiveness comes naturally out of that. And the less of me, that's the ego part, the less of me that's in the way, the easier that is to do. With Okamura Rishi, and my teacher says the same. My teacher always says, why do we bow? We bow to others. He says, because we can't bow to ourselves. And he always makes me try it. He's like, try bowing to yourself. Like, you can't do it backwards. So I must bow to my Buddha nature in you, and you must bow to your Buddha nature in me. This is Buddha meeting Buddha. And as Buddha meets Buddha, then forgiveness naturally comes up. Or I would say the lack of forgiveness naturally drops away.
Andrea Henderson asks, why is it so difficult to just continue practicing online rather than face-to-face in the Zendo with Sangha? I practice Zazen every day at home, but it's not always easy.
Yeah, I hear you. It's because we need each other. So last Saturday, I did a one-day sitting outside. And somebody who had only been primarily been practicing online, he's still pretty new to practice, came for that outside sitting. And I think in their body really saw the difference. And when we are in the same physical space, then we share energy. So that if one person is struggling, the others buoy them up. If one person is tired, they can just relax back into the energy of the group. And likewise, if some people have extra energy, they can help the people who have less. And when we're in the same physical space, then we feel that in our bodies. So when we're on Zoom, we have to be very intentional about creating that through our facial expressions, through our words, and doing a little more. So I found myself using my hands a lot more lately and using more expressions. Or when I'm working as a chaplain and people can't see my mouth, right? Then I have to use my eyes a lot more and I have to smile. So I think we have to do this in Zoom too. We have to find ways to reach out, both energetically, from our hearts and through our body language as well.
Thank you for that. Ira R says, thank you so much for your wonderful talk. Thinking about fame, is Dogen saying that fame in and of itself is a bad thing, or is it just seeking a fame that is to be avoided? For example, the Dalai Lama has a lot of fame. Is there something inherently wrong with that?
Yeah, there's the essential question right there. I think, the Dalai Lama didn't set out to become famous, right? And another person mentioned, Venerable Pema Chodron has a lot of books that came out, so she got to be famous. And these people are famous because some people appreciated their practice and were naturally drawn to that. But Pema Chodron once shared that she really struggled with having her talks published and was finally convinced to do so because the sales from them benefit the monastery. So I think that's where our intention comes in. If our intention is for the benefit of all beings, and we're living very simply, then sometimes that fame comes in through the back door. But I'm just looking for the Dogen quote. He says, if we say, I seek fame and gain and love gain for the benefit of sentient beings, this is a greatly mistaken view. And as you might recall, this is the point where he goes full Southern Baptist on us, and he gets very fiery. If we say, I seek fame and love gain for the benefit of sentient beings, this is a greatly mistaken view. So fame should never be something that we seek, and gain should not be something that we love. In fact, His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, often describes it as a burden that he willingly took on through his vow, but not something that he would have chosen for himself intentionally. And I want to use this window to make a plug for something that that came up when I was studying this fascicle. You know, Rujing, Dogen's teacher, was said to have kept a zafu in his sleeve, a really thin zafu, so that he could sit wherever he went. And when I was thinking of this zafu, somebody once asked me, Tinku, what American Zen teachers do you most admire? And that's exactly the image I got in my head, was a little bitty zafu that was like this big, and it's really thin, like this thin, and it's shiny because it's been used for so many years, every single day, the same zafu, this little thin pancake of a zafu. And it belongs to Rujing Paul Haller, who's going to be here next week. This guy embodies continuous practice. He, if you go to the Zendo first, he's in there. If you sit in the Zendo last, he's in there. And I think I say this because these Ani Pema Chodron and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, these people are here, they're alive. We have inspiration all around us to make us really, feel the life energy of the Buddhas and ancestors. They're not some old people in a book. These are real, this is a real alive life. So thank you for letting me put in the extra about Paul.
We appreciate it. Thank you. Shannon and Luca from Fort Worth, Texas ask, thank you for your beautiful talk. If you have to continue, what do we do if the quality of our meditation declines over time? How do we work with the repetitive feeling of just doing the same thing over and over? How do we fix that?
If our practice starts to really become a kind of lagging, then we have to add a little energy in. If our practice gets too, wound up, then we need to relax into it a little bit. And the Buddha taught that this is the practice of not too tight, not too loose. So if you're in that particular place where you're just not feeling the energy, it's time to add a little bit more. So when you're sitting, really, focus on your concentration and just hit the gas just a little bit more. And if you start to, get tight in your shoulders or your jaws clenching and you're just like, then this is the time to breathe into your practice a little bit more. So I think, Venerable Soma asked the Buddha about this question, and he was a lute player before he was ordained. And the Buddha said, what does it take to make a beautiful and harmonious sound? And the Buddha said, when you tune the strings of the lute, you want them not too tight and not too loose. We want that beautiful and harmonious sound. So if your strings are a little bit loose, then it's time to tighten them a little bit. And if your strings are too tight, then loosen them a little bit. But this isn't like a checkbox where you just finish. This is a constant adjustment that we need to do all the time. And this is the continuous part of it. Is, if we think like, check, we're done, I got that one, I want to move on, then then we need to return to that and readjust. This is the continuous part of the practice.
Ruriko Watanabe says, thank you for the talk. Your story directly hit me in the heart. How do I, as a layperson, spread this egolessness to others?
Thank you. You just do it. I mean, I know that sounds, I don't mean to be too simplistic, really, because, you know, doing it takes effort. So you make the effort and do it. And we find ways to do that in every aspect of our life. We do it by showing through our bodies, not telling through our mouths. So find ways in every part of your life, with your coworkers at work, or whether you're on a Zoom call even, to show it and do it. And then learn from the times that don't go so well. Bring it back to, you know, to your Zazen practice. Bring them to your teacher to explore and continue to grow.
Patricia Masuera asks, as a woman of color, it has taken years to feel empowered to stand up for ourselves and speak up and be assertive. How do we still do this while putting ourselves at the lowest in every encounter, especially when the others are perhaps unaware of Buddha nature and are happily putting themselves also above us and taking advantage of the situation?
Yeah, it doesn't say I have to let people stomp all over me. So thinking, and it says I will learn to see myself as the lowest amongst all, respectfully hold others to be supreme in the very depths of my heart. So what we find supreme in others is their Buddha nature. So we don't have to honor the arrogance or the oppression or the sexism or the racism. That's their stuff. That's not ours. We just have to see the Buddha in them. And, you know, even the most difficult person still has Buddha nature. You know, even the most aggressive leader still has Buddha. We have to believe this and we have to practice this, but we don't have to let them, you know, we don't have to somehow conflate humility with oppression, because they're not the same at all. Oppression needs for us to stand up. And in this case, it's the job of the others to give you some space to stand up and to really, you know, stand in your own power and stand in your own body and really figure out what that is. Where is confidence? Remember, I was talking about pride and confidence. This is not about pride. It's allowing our ideas of self and I to drop. And once that drops, then this natural confidence arises. And this is where you will find your own personal power. This is where you'll find your Buddha nature and be able to do this practice of seeing the Buddha nature in all beings. And it's the rest of, you know, those who are white, those who are men. It's your job to help, to give her space for this. Step back a little bit.
So Ty wants to know, where in the South are you from?
Madison County, Florida. It's the easiest question of the evening.
Yeah.
Did you ever read the book Absalom, Absalom? You want to hear how that ends? Yeah. I don't know if this is the right place, but I'll do it anyway. That Quentin is in college, and he's telling this horrible story of this family drama in Mississippi to his college roommate. And they're in New England where it's cold and dark. And his roommate says, Quentin, why do you hate the South so much? And Quentin goes, I don't hate it. He says, panting in the cold New England dark. I don't hate it. I don't hate it. So this is my relationship to rural northern Florida.
I think we have time for one more question. Donna Estes says Mahatma Gandhi did not seek fame for fame's sake. Can you define practice as applying precepts to how you live life? What do you do as a human in relation to others?
Define practice as applying precepts.
I think she's saying, how do you
Okay.
make the precepts real? How do we apply it to relationships?
Yeah. The precepts are, the precepts are one page in our vast and wide guidebook of Buddhism. So we have this guide that we can use to help us along. And this guide has been developed over successive generations of Buddhas and ancestors for our benefit right here and right now. So the precepts are part of this guide. So the precepts are the ethical rules for living our life. And we have these as a tool for how to show up. Like I talked about one, I vow not to put myself up and put others down. But, we inevitably do that. We do it all the time. So then what do? We make repair, we start over. So we have this guide to keep reorienting ourselves. So I think for me, that's their role is a reorientation. So as monks and nuns, we renew our vows, we renew the precepts on every full moon. So when we do this, we have this like, bring it back to center, start from here.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank